not a manual. However, there was a guy that came and his Power Stroke diesel or some whatever truck he had was bucking and jerking, and we had to work on it. And whenever the porter pulled it around to for him to pick it up, it was bucking and jerking because I didn't know how to drive a stick. He thought it wasn't fixed. He was really mad. I wasn't the one that worked on it, but they had me drive with the guy and calm him down, and usually I can do that. Frames of reference. Okay, the Secret Service was established as a law enforcement agency in 1865, and while most people associate the Secret Service with protecting the president, what was the original purpose of the Secret Service?
Spy.
Huh?
The assassination of Lincoln.
Well, their primary job, believe it or not, is counterfeiting. I mean, that's to fight counterfeiting and all that kind of stuff. So, and I got a reason for saying this, and this is going somewhere related to what we're talking about. Okay, so here we've got a situation where how do they train Secret Service agents to spot phony bills?
They have watermarks in the bills.
No, I mean, if you're going to train somebody to spot something that's phony or faulty, what's the best way to do it?
Give them the real stuff.
Yay, listen to him. Listen to Lundy. Give them the real stuff. And so what you're going to do is you look at the real money until you're sick of looking at it, and you look at every detail with a magnifying glass, and you look at it, look at it, look at it, and then as soon as somebody hands you a phony, you know it. My wife is a bank teller, and she can take a bill. She catches bills that everybody else misses because she's just really sharp about noticing details. And she said, "This is a phony $100 bill." And they said, "How do you know this $100 bill is phony? It's even got a strip in it." She said, "But look at the strip. The strip says 5. It doesn't say 100. So they washed a $5 bill and reprinted it as 100 on the same paper." You know what I'm saying? And that's what they do. You know what I mean? They got a way of washing that. But anyway, so basically the long and the short of it is a counterfeit or a faulty problem sound like a sore thumb. That's the world of automotive computer data. If I showed you a screen and I said, let's look at this screen with these squiggly lines on it, it's an oscilloscope of all of the stuff that's going on, inputs, outputs. If you've never seen the way one's supposed to look, you're not going to be able to tell. Or even a scan tool screen with just numbers. If I look at a scan tool screen and I see a mass airflow reading, I'm looking at grams per second, and I see a mass airflow reading that says 10 grams per second, is that okay with you?
No.
Why?
It's way too low.
Is it too low? See, that illustrates, that's too high.
That's
It's over twice what it was supposed to be. If you're used to looking at the real stuff, you'll be able to pick out the bad one. And what I used to do, whenever I first started working, whenever I first went to electronic engine control school with Ford back in 1986, I went up there and they gave us this big old book that was this thick called the H manual. And it would have these little trouble trees in it that looked vaguely like this right here, where they would say yes and no. You know, check this. If it answers yes, you go this way. If the answer is no, you go that way. The only problem is when the service engineers cobbled all of that hogwash together, what they didn't realize was there was a lot of boo-boos and mistakes in it, and a lot of times you'd go in a circle and come back where you started and you still wouldn't have fixed the car. And I said, you know, I think I could probably take a voltmeter and I could back probe connectors and I could look at the voltages on a bunch of good cars, and then I wouldn't need this book anymore. And everything was fuel injection, and we're not talking carburetors, not then. So I threw the H manual back on the shelf and I stopped using it, except for occasionally I look for pinout information or something like that in there. So anyway, I started measuring this, and I would measure it. I would say engine coolant temperature sensor on a hot engine is about 6/10. The fan comes on at 0.45, and I was measuring the good stuff. And then whenever they got one in there that wasn't right, I could measure it and I'd say, aha, I've been seeing this voltage on other ones and I know this ain't right, so something's wrong here. You got me? That's what you're going to do. All right, so here back in the early stages, you know, they would tell you, Ford used to say, unplug the engine coolant sensor and measure the resistance of the engine coolant sensor. Well, that was silly. Why don't you just measure the voltage and then you're seeing what the computer's seeing? See what I'm saying? With it plugged in, you measure the voltage and all that. All right. So this particular PT Cruiser we're talking about here was bucking and jerking, but it had a little bit of a history with us. The first time we saw this, and it had a lot of miles on it. First time we saw this PT Cruiser, It was in here for a timing belt. And I don't think it jumped time, I think she just wanted it changed, because she had enough history with vehicles where she knew if you had to change a timing belt, huh?
Doing the jerk.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, doing the jerk, that's what it was doing, it was doing the jerk. But one way or another, we put a timing belt on it, everything was fine, she drove it for another couple of years. And what happened, I got a picture of the guy that put the timing belt on it sitting there, so he looked like he was sitting there all beat up, because you know how much it pays to put a timing belt on a VT Cruiser? It's 8 hours to put a timing belt on it. And the reason it's 8 hours is because the engine's crammed in there under that hood. You gotta pull the passenger side strut and all this hogwash to get to it. We did all that stuff. Got it all done, fixed it up. After you've done a bunch of them, you can knock one out in about 2.5, 3 hours, and you get paid 8 hours if you're on commission, right? Because we make our money by getting the work done quick and getting paid by the book. That's how we do that money here. All right, so here we go. This thing here, she decided it was time to get another one put on, and by that time she was retired and she was a teacher. So she went to out there to a place that did work close to her. So they put a timing belt on it, and the first thing that happened after she left the shop, and this is one of those age-old situations where you're just swearing up and down there's a big problem. She's driving it along, and it bucks and it jerks, and it's about to jerk a crick in her neck sometimes, but not every time. Like she'll be driving it, and also start bucking and jerking, and sometimes it would stall, and it would go, and it wouldn't start. And then after she said a little while, it might start and it might not. I mean, there wasn't any set pattern to it. I rode it with her. We couldn't get it to do anything. I drove it with her. And this is the kind of stuff that goes on. It's like Melissa this morning. I went over there and I turned on the headlights on that Dodge Dakota, and they wouldn't come on. And then I jiggled the switch, and then they came on, and all that. So she goes over here and she turns on the switch, and they come on every time she turns the switch on. Well, then whenever I says, well, let's pull the headlight switch out and look at it, because she pulls it out and look at it, and one of the terminals is burned loose, and the connector's melted, and all this kind of hogwash. Yeah. But see, from her perspective, I don't really see a problem. You got me? So you got to go beyond this business of saying, I don't see a problem, so I'm going to root this one out the door and go on the next one. These people got a serious problem, particularly something like stoplights. Okay, so this thing is driving along here, and it's bucking and jerking, and so she brought it back to the shop after we under. So after they got put the timing belt on, she got the bucking and jerking. She got a 1391 code, which is a loss of the cam and or crank signals. The cam sensor was replaced, and it draws its signal from the end of the camshaft. That was the cam sensor, not the crank sensor. It didn't change anything. He put that on there because it was, I guess, cheaper and easier to get to or whatever. So she takes it to the dealer, and the dealer says it's going to be $1,000 because we need to put an engine controller on it. Wow. This is what she's getting from the dealer, right? Well, she really didn't like that. As a matter of fact, she said, I'm going to try to buy an engine controller used, and I said, you can't really do that without reprogramming it, but let's don't go there. It's kind of like, you remember the other day, whenever, the little gal came in here on the gold Mazda, and she says, I went by the parts house, and the parts house told me I needed a mass airflow sensor, and we smoke tested it and found out all she needed was a vacuum leak fixed.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know how many times I've seen that. And if somebody plugs in a scan tool, they want to get a code, change a part, and be done. And that's just not usually the way it is. You see that a lot. How many times do you see a scan tool plugged in, a part replaced, and a vehicle fixed at the parts store?
Not very often.
Well, not very often. Usually they're just not really happy with you.
No.
Because you plugged it in, sold them a part, now they got the same problem, and now they feel like they've been stuck.
I try not to sell parts. I don't like doing it.
Okay, she brings the vehicle to the shop, and we did the driveway. Well, she duplicated the concern eventually, and it was a violent symptom that was common to all of the cylinders. Now, this is something else you need to think about when you're doing drivability and electronics work. Is it common to a bunch of different things? On an engine, are all the cylinders misfiring, or are just one of them misfiring? Is it misfiring under a load, or is it misfiring in idle but not under a load? If it's misfiring in idle but not under a load, you very probably have an air leak somewhere. If it's something common to all the cylinders, it's something that's feeding them all, which would be like your engine coolant. Not your engine coolant. It'd be like your fuel, or some kind of an air problem, or something to do with EGR, or something to do with power feeding the whole fuel system, and all that. Go and get me a battery. Just dig you a battery, one of the crummiest looking battery that you can find from up under that bench, and use that for your core. Okay. Well, we're changing out the battery in the Sonata, by the way, because it's, it's only $23 on,
Wow.
Actually, it's an adjustment. That's what it is.
That's good.
Okay, excuse me while I take care of this. What did Brett say about the wrong distributor, Kathy? No, she's out there carrying a battery, I shouldn't have called her. All right, I'm gonna leave these for her to sort out. Okay, now listen to what I'm telling you here. All right, so if it's a coil pack, you know the coil packs that you have that's got two coil, what did he say about the distributor, by the way?
Guess he's trying to get you one.
Okay, well, he better, that's all I got to say. Here, put these on this, on there. All right, so here we got this situation that happens. So, I'm saying, I'm feeling something that's common to every cylinder on it. I'm not feeling something that feels like you're firing a machine gun. You know, that's what's a misfire, that's what that feels like, and all that. Now, if it doesn't do it under load, and it doesn't do it at idle, but it does it when you're at a float, and you're looking at something like EGR, okay? Because EGR doesn't work at idle, it doesn't work under load, it only does it. So if you've got a problem like you got spark plugs that are fouled with the ice cream looking deposits from valve stem seals, and an EGR will make it surge, or you've got separate little ports feeding EGR into each cylinder like some of your Nissan pickups and the V6 Ford valve, if all of them are clogged except one, the one that's getting all the EGR is going to skip, but only whenever you're into it. You got me? So you need to be able to think this through. I'm feeling something that's common to everything. Okay, so we pull some codes with the scan tool we got available. Let's turn it off so we can see that better. We got a PO320 crankshaft position sensor circuit. We got a PO340 camshaft position sensor circuit. We got a P1391 lossless camshaft. That's the same code that he got. The third, what's the difference, once again, what's the difference between this code and these two?
One of them is for everything, the O's are for everything, and the one's manufacturer specific.
Yeah, these are OBD2, and this is manufacturer specific. And isn't it interesting that these two right here are showing up in OBD2, and each one of them seem to be clearly defining something, and this one here is throwing a blanket. Usually the manufacturer code is a lot more refined. Like if you would flash the codes on one and then you pull your scan tool code, you'll have a lot more refinement on what the code means. Like a manufacturer code will point you right to a component almost. The OBD code says you may have something out here. You know? So that's basically what we're looking at. I'm going to turn this back on so I can see my notes. All right, so here's what we had another thing that was, looking here. This further complicated, these pins kept indicating a loss of cam crank. Look, see, crank signal, yes. Current sink, lost. See that? Cylinder one misfire count, no, and all that. But see this right here? These two is what I'm looking at. We were losing that. All right, so here we go. Trying to track this. Huh? What?
Looking at the temps there.
Yeah,
So
okay. Now, I noticed while I was holding the throttle in the service bay that sometimes, even when it wasn't under a load, it would buck and jerk. You see? All right, the PCM had stored this 1391 with the 340 and the 320. All right, we connected the timing light, and this is a cool thing to do. You know the timing light that we got? You turn on it, it's better if you got one that you can, you know, turn it on and let it keep flashing all the time. You hook it up to one of your plug wires if you have plug wires, because you're not going to have them on cop coil cars, and we use something different for that. Hook that thing up, let that light flash. While this thing is dropping out and acting crazy, let's see if the timing light flash goes away during these missing functions, and you know you're dropping your spark, and that's what's causing your problem. You see what I'm saying? It's giving you it's a troubleshooting thing that doesn't cost anything to do. And I've actually driven them down the road with a timing light that had a long enough thing where you go in the car and just let it lay in a floorboard and drive along, and I'd watch it, you know, over there flashing in the floorboard. And when the car starts bucking and jerking, the timing light's coming and going with it. So I know that's what you got going on there. All right, so here we are. We got 56 PSI. The fuel pressure is good and strong. Injectors were clicking, and the timing light we connected for our test valve showed that there was a good spark pushing through, even though, you know, we were having our jerk and all that. All right, so next thing we want to do, we're going to look at our crank sensor. Look at our crank sensor here. What do you see there? Hadn't been touched, had it?
No.
No evidence that anybody's ever laid a hand on that crank sensor. That's one of the codes, though. Everything looked pretty good. So it was seeping oil, though. And you ever seen a sensor seep oil? You remember how the brake fluid sensor was pushing brake fluid up through there? It's got high pressure. Well, if you got one right there and it's seeping oil through there so that it looks like this. See how wet that is up in there?
Mm-hmm.
All right. With the sensor removed, we found a puddle of oil that could only come from the crankcase through the sensor windings and up past the pins. And that's not really a good thing on a sensor. Now, if you pull a spark plug out and you see a bunch of oil puddle in a spark plug well, that's not necessarily a big deal because the spark is still gonna, you know, go through there and jump. On the sensor signal though, you can have issues because of this. Okay, and so what I did there, we put the crank sensor on it. We're gonna scope it though because we're still having trouble. All right, now look at this. This is really important. I'm working my way through this pretty quick. When we through it.
Hey, Rich.
Huh?
You said on the first slide that was doing the jerk slide, it said it was a 2.4 L engine. That right there is 2.0 L.
Yeah, it is, but the signals are the same. And the reason that we had that, and that's a good, do you know how quick he was to catch that? That was sharp, wasn't it? I got this actually came from Chrysler originally, but I got it via Identifix. Because I had them on the phone. I said, I need to know what the cam and crank are supposed to look like. I didn't have a car that I could compare. Well, I kind of did, because if you take the neon
Yeah.
and you hook into the cam and crank on the neon, you're going to see this same kind of signal. And the 2.0 and the 2.4 are both 4-cylinders. That's how you're going to see that. The 2.4 was a little bigger because the PT Cruiser is a little heavier engine. And the 2.4 had a balance shaft and the 2.0 didn't. But as far as these signals, you're looking at the same. Now watch this. All right, here's what you got right here. Right down here is where everything starts. Here's your crank angle. We're starting at 0. All right. See, we've gone through one full cycle. We're going through another. This is a full cycle, 720 degrees of crank angle. All right. Now this is, look at this. You got 4 little spikes here, 4 little, what do you call it, little square wave deal, and then you got this one. Now look at the cam signal, 210 degrees, 150 degrees, 150 degrees, and 210 degrees. So basically, you're looking at those. Now this is how they're supposed to line up. We're going to get a little closer zoom into this, and this is where your cylinder goes. This is a cool little thing. It's telling you which valves are open and all that. Cylinder number 2, 4, 3. All right. Now, the intake valve is going to open right here. You're starting at top dead center intake on cylinder number 1, right? Okay, you're starting down, intake valve is open for this amount of time. How many degrees is that of crankshaft rotation? About?
About 60 at the beginning to, let's see,
Roughly 60 to, what's over here?
280.
280. So from, if you go 60 to 280, this thing's making a whole movement of one piston down with that intake valve open because it wants all the air it can get, right? Okay, then it closes. All right, and then you're basically, what happens right after that stroke?
Compression.
Compression stroke. So basically you're going to start squeezing your air, right? Okay, now you see ignition coil 1 and 4 fires here. Ignition coil 2 and 3 fires here. You see how all that stuff comes together? Now one of those engineers put this is if you look at the ignition and injection sequence chart. All right, look at your injector 1. When is injector 1 going to spray? It's been spraying already, hasn't it? Right before this opens is when your injector's starting to spray. All right. All right. Oh, now when does this fire?
It's spraying behind the,
Sprays behind the intake valve, and the intake valve opens, the fuel goes in there, the spark happens on 1 and 4 at the same time because we've got companion cylinders that are popping at the same time like a motorcycle, right?
Yep.
That's how that works. Okay, so here we go. We got spark happening right there. Now this one right here that's colored in, basically, one of them is on exhaust and one is on compression. So it's going to fire on the exhaust stroke too. All right, the long and short of it was, I'm interested in what this relationship's all about right here. So I don't really need all this information up here. I just went over it because it was kind of interesting. Look, here's the cam and crank sequence chart. Now this is really important. You need to be able to sort this out. And I had to get it from Identifix because I didn't have it available through no other thing I had. No other resource I had available to me at the time had this. Okay, so right here, our cam signal, our 210 degree cam signal is supposed to be cutting right here, right? See that right there?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so our 150 degree cam signal is supposed to be splitting these two. You got me? So you got 4, 2, 1. Here's 1 right here. So halfway through this deep bucket between the 4 pulses, and notice this one here, you can see the difference between these. This one here's got 4, this one's got 3, but the first one's really long. See, that's how it's gonna tell what's what. And these have to be right. Now, I've got somewhere I'm going with that. This is what it looked like on my scope. All right, can we see this? These are the 150s, these are the 210, that's the 210, that's the 150. All right, you see that? Now, let's look and see right here what we got. I drew these lines with my yellow. So we see, I'm gonna back up, we're gonna compare that again. See where this is supposed to be? These lines are, these dotted lines are drawn right here. I drew my lines at the same place. Okay, you see that? See that one right there? It's supposed to be over in the middle. It's looking to me like this is out of time a little bit. And we checked that and it wasn't out of time. So this led us astray. You see what I'm saying? And I don't like that. If I'm seeing something that doesn't line up, I saw this one other time on an Altima that was showing that it was out of line like that. It was a different pattern. It turned out that one had a bad sensor. What we found on this one, and this is going to sound really stupid by the time I get to the end of it, I reached up under there, underneath, and because you had to have the car up in the air with it running to do all this, I jerk on the wires and I feel the engine buck and jerk. And I pull on the wires again and I feel it buck and jerk. And it turns out that we need a pigtail for that connector because we had one wire that wasn't quite touching in there. Now, what did that have to do with the guy's timing belt job? Nothing. So he's driving along here. I mean, she drives it out of the shop after he puts a timing belt on it. I'm getting this stuff and it's leading me to think it's out of time. But we go back and let's just say, this is getting kind of crazy because we know it's not out of time. Let's just do this one more thing. Let's go under here and do something really simple. Let's just pull on these wires and see what we get. After we put a pigtail in it, you know, and routed the wires right now, I had to order a pigtail for it and plug that thing in with a new sensor because we didn't want one that was leaking oil. She was cooking with grease. She's just driving away. So anyway, the long and the short of it is, we made it harder than it was by trying to overanalyze it. Now, I'm not saying you should never scope the cam and the crank sensor because a lot of times you'll fix one like that. In this particular case, the problem, we looked so deep that we didn't know. However, I will also say this. Imagine yourself looking.
Hey, Rich.
Yeah.
We need another note paper.
Yeah. Okay, we're just about through that. But anyway, I've got a, whenever we're, the point of this, this title of this little presentation was, it was frames of reference. And because you got the article I wrote about it. If you don't have a good frame of reference, which would be here, that's your frame of reference right there. You have to know what it's supposed to be before you check it to see if it's like it should be. You see what I'm saying? Now this was interesting to look at, but you can overanalyze something, and there's times when you need to just go back, start over, and get yourself relook. I mean, take a new look at things. Because you can also say, it wasn't doing this before the guy put the timing belt on it, so it has to be something he did. That's not true either in a lot of cases. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. But I usually like to plow in there like I've never seen it before and analyze it, you know, like it's the first time, like I don't know somebody else has worked on it. Good, that's useful information to know, but you can overanalyze it for that reason too. Okay, now somebody tell me something that you learned from what I just told you. This story's over. The car is running, we're in great shape. So somebody tell me something you learned that you didn't know before you came in here.
Always think about the simple things.
1865, the primary job was counterfeiting. How do you train a secret service? Tell the difference between real and counterfeit.
I didn't say read all your notes. Tell me something. Tell me something you learned. Tell me something you know now that's going to help you in the shop.
The 2.0 and 2.4 have the same sensor reading.
They do, as long as it's non-turbo.
Mass
What I'm saying.
airflow is supposed to read 5 grams.
Huh? What?
Mass airflow is supposed to read 5 grams.
Well, more or less. Well, you're going to look at all these cars. A 6-cylinder, a V6 is going to read about 4 grams. If you get the more cylinders you got, the bigger the engine is, the more grams you're going to read idling. And I'm talking idling. I'm not talking, you know, drunk driving down the road.
Wide open throttle.
Biggest thing
Or
is
half or part throttle, or you know.
to get a good reference frame so you don't overanalyze.
Well, the whole thing is you need to make sure that you plug a scan tool in as many cars as you can while you're in here. Plug it in, look through those PIDs, see what they're supposed to be. Look at the common stuff. What are my oxygen sensors looking like? What is my mass airflow sensor looking like? And I used to have, we would have this portable vehicle analyzer. It was part of the SBDS machine back when I used to use it, Dinosaur. I love that thing. I used it for 10 years and it was my best friend. You plug that thing in and you'd hook it in between the engine controller and the wire harness, and you could actually record like 1,000 times a second, you know, what was going on. And this one guy had this F-150 he would drive, and he says, this thing feels like you rear-ended it. Just driving down the road, there's somebody, feels like somebody ran into the back of it and there's nobody around. And he said, what's up with this? So I put the vehicle analyzer in it, and I got to where I could do it. Whenever I would top out over a hill, and I would be coming out of it just right, and this was like a, you know, 95 mile or whatever, it would go boom. It would feel like somebody ran into the back end of it. And I saw, when I'm a portable vehicle analyzer, there was a mode that these things had called lean cruise mode. When you're driving down the road and you were just cruising, they were trying to get as good a gas mileage as they could. They'd come out of closed loop fuel control and they would just let it run really lean. And that's trying to help the gas mileage. It was a programming thing that they typed into the engine controller. So I was looking at this doggone thing and I said, I see lean cruise mode and I'm afraid, but why does it all of a sudden go back into closed loop and kick the EGR open at the same time? Well, it wants to make sure everything is okay. Well, I mean, it closed the EGR, went back into closed loop, and then it would bang. So I made that recording, went back, uploaded it to the engineers at Ford, and the guy calls me and he goes, you're never going to fix this. But the thing had already been at another Ford dealership, and they had replaced everything except the hood of the truck. And they brought it to me after that. So I says, there was another one I had that was skipping. It was a Crown Victoria that was a 95 model. And I said, I've got an issue here where I've got a 95 model Crown Victoria that's going boop, 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 boop. And so the guy started tap dancing around up at the hotline because I couldn't really find anything wrong with it. Everything had already been done. And I says, look, I don't want to spend a bunch of warranty money or anybody else's money on this car until you tell me something, because right now all of my data is coming up clean and I've got a car that's got a skip on it that acts like a spark plug or a wire, and I know it's not. And so finally I pushed the guy to the point to where he broke. He goes, he says, okay, we've never been able to fix one of those. You know, I said, well, tell me the truth. I said, well, we had a Lincoln that we worked with a guy on, and they replaced the transmission, they replaced this, they replaced that, and they couldn't never get it to quit doing it. And I said, well, it's a screwball because it's OBD2, but it's got EDIS, which was a module, wow, like this one here. And in in 96, they put this function in the engine controller. In 95 on a Crown Victoria, they had it out here. I said, it's got standalone EDIS and it's got OBD2. It's a strange, the only year they did that. And I said, I can fix it if you'll give me authorization for warranty. I said, what? I said, let me get the engine controller and the wire harness to do away with EDIS and make it like an 06. I can make it stop doing this. He goes, oh, well, I can't do that. I said, all right then. So I told the guy, I said, we can't fix it. I said, nothing I can do with this. It's not anything. So the long and short of it is you can't redesign one. And I told the guy that had that truck, and while I was talking to the Heartline engineer, this guy overheard me, this old farmer that was out there, and he goes, my truck does that. I thought something was wrong with the transmission on it. And I said, well, he's telling me you're going to have to put up with that if you drive it exactly that way. But when somebody finds out one's doing that, that's right where they want to drive it. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, that's the end of the story.
I got one for you. About 5 o'clock this morning, I got a call. There was a young man stopped at Beasley Store. He's driving a 2011 Hyundai Tuscan. And when I got there, the car was going to so immediately I threw the battery cables on, and I cranked the car. Well, I got it started. And then while it was sitting there idling, it was going whoa, whoa, whoa.
Hunting up and down, yeah.
Uh,
Oh, and you want to know what that is?
He told me, I said, well, obviously you was playing with the gas or something, I guess, and you probably got gas. I said, what you do on the way home, just mash it. And
Had he been having trouble with this before, or was this the first time it had been jumped off? And it was the first time the battery had been dead? All right, then what he did was he lost his adaptive memory. He's got a little bit of a dirty throttle body, and it's lost its adaptive memory because the battery was dead. And he was running like it was a brand new vehicle, but it had a dirty throttle body. It's like a bad. If you wash the throttle body and take the battery cable off again and let it start over, it'd probably clear it up.
It did.
Yeah.
But he had to run it a few minutes before it cleared
It was adaptive learning. That's what it was, and that's not unusual for adaptive learning on a Dodge pickup. You can put a battery in a Dodge pickup. Sometimes it won't idle. until you clean the throttle body or until you let it learn to idle again. You may have to drive it around for an hour before it'll learn to idle sometime. So that's not unusual either. All right.